They don't get promoted for not pursuing charges against you. This is how they get ahead in life. If I'm this guy outside Syracuse and I'm cool with doing wet work, admit nothing, deny everything, make counter accusations.
What does it mean for a man to butter his wife's horse? And if that man works at this, does that limit his career options? What's it like to have dinner with a mob boss? What's it like in the year 2025? Can you have dinner with Tucker Carlson and an Italian mob boss in the same week? Answers to questions like this and much more are coming up in the conversation. If you like hearing from John Kiriakou as much as I do, this is a fun one. Welcome to the Austin and Matt podcast.
I did Tucker Carlson yesterday. It'll come out in the next couple of days. Yeah, he's been a great friend to me. I was on his show like a dozen times when he was on Fox, and then I haven't been on the podcast yet. So it was great seeing him. But we sat there for 2.5 hours recording, and the night before we had dinner. He invited me over to his house for dinner, and 3.5 hours we sat there and talked. There's a lot to say.
No way.
Oh, we should have that one recorded.
Especially between you two. Yeah.
He's it's funny, when I first went on Fox, he made a comment like to the effect that you and I probably disagree on 95% of the issues, but blah blah blah. And then he said last night, you know what? He said, I don't know if you've changed or if I've changed, but we agree on pretty darn close to 100% of things. And I said, we do, actually. It's kind of crazy.
How cool.
My guess is that he's changed, right? It seems like he's moved a little bit more towards the fringe.
He's been on his own journey, it seems. I think like we've all gotten a public watch of him just moving along his own journey. And it's been really fun to see. Yeah.
He's far more libertarian, I think, than he used to be. Yeah, far more libertarian.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's funny
that
sometimes puts him. Oh yeah. That libertarianism puts him very close sometimes to people like Glenn Greenwald or me or any number of other people who would consider themselves to be leftists. But it's not about right versus left. It's about civil rights and civil liberties.
That's right.
Is there anyone that interviews you like on a regular basis that you really don't see eye to eye with, and it kind of grinds a little bit, but it's it's worth doing the interview? Yeah.
No, and that's a great question. I'll tell you why. It's because I've come to the realization that the ideological spectrum is not a straight line from left to right. It's a circle, and at a certain point, the left and the right meet. And I've become so anti-duopoly that I'm happy to agree. I don't care if people identify as conservatives or as Republicans or as liberals or Democrats or whatever. There are issues that we agree on, and I embrace those issues. I don't care what people's personal politics are.
I love that.
Genuinely.
I think it's like not getting caught in the forest from the trees, and always remembering that we're all Americans and we want the best. So no, we don't have a lot. We don't hate people. We don't hate, like, the point is not to hate and to be divisive. The point is to seek common ground and just go, hey, we all want the same thing, right? We're just getting there maybe in different ways. But at the end of the day, we both agree that this is what we want. And as long as we're doing that, instead of assuming the other side is evil and my side is right and more has the moral high ground, I think that you can find this commonalities. It doesn't feel like it should be that much of a challenge.
You're absolutely right. We talked, for example, he asked me kind of an odd question toward the end of the conversation. He asked me what examples I could give him of governmental actions that I'm opposed to outside of the community. Like, I consider myself to be a critic of the CIA, a critic of NSA, a critic of whatever. And I said, well, off the top of my head, look at the Bureau of Land Management. Most Americans have never even heard of the Bureau of Land Management. And it wreaks havoc on farmers in the West. And I end up finding myself in support of, for example, the Bundy family, which many Americans view as being so far to the right as to be like off the charts. But by God, they were right about the Bureau of Land Management. I talked to him about this case that I followed in Hawaii, where there was a woman who's a GS-12, mid-level nobody from the Commerce Department's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Because she's a GS-12, she's living in Honolulu, you can't make ends meet. So she and a business partner bought a boat together, and they would take tourists out on the boat on weekends to go whale watching. So one weekend they're out there and they come upon an orca feeding on a seal carcass. And so everybody runs to the side of the boat. They're taking pictures and video of the killer whale eating the seal. And somebody whistles at the whale, to try to get it to stay near the surface. I don't know, for whatever reason. Not that, do orcas have ears? I suppose they must, but who knows? So,
some kind. Yeah.
So a couple of weeks later, there's a pounding on her apartment door, and it's the Do you own this boat? She said, yes. You take tourists out on the boat? Yes. Did you see the whale? Yes. Did you whistle at the whale? She said, no. Somebody did, but no, I didn't whistle at the whale. Do you know who did? She said, no, but I take videos of every outing and I sell the videos to the DVDs to the tourists. The FBI takes all the DVDs. They come back another couple of weeks later. They raid the place. They take her computer. They take her phone. They take her laptop. They take everything. And they charge her with one felony count of interfering in the feeding of a wild animal, which is a violation of the Endangered Species Act. This is a felony. She fights this thing for 5 years. She loses her job at the Commerce Department. She loses her pension. She loses her business and her boat. She loses her condo. She has to move in with her parents in San Francisco. And finally, they reduce the charge to a misdemeanor. She pays a fine and she's finally done. Now, is American society better? Is American society safer? Because the FBI went after this woman for maybe or maybe not whistling at a whale? Seriously?
How did they even know that she did it? How did that even begin?
Yeah, did somebody
ratting
her out?
Yeah, somebody ratted her out.
Yeah. What?
And I said to Tucker, I said, one of the sad things is individual FBI's don't get promoted by not arresting you. They don't get promoted for not pursuing charges against you. This is how they get ahead in life. And so, sure, we should expect that the FBI is going to break down your door and take all your stuff because you whistled at the whale.
Yeah, that's right. We have to watch incentive structures because surprise, surprise, humans act in their own incentive structures. And so, I think that's always been a question, do policemen have quotas for handing out speeding tickets? Because if there was a quota, they would give out more. And they're like, no, that's illegal. We don't do it. But somehow, but if there are these incentive structures, then it shouldn't be surprising when someone's just doing their job and they might get a promotion. It's irrelevant to them as to what's actually happening. But if they can get a promotion, then they'll do it.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up too, because just this weekend, there was a piece in the Washington Post saying that police in Honolulu have been caught charging people with DUI, even though they're stone cold sober, just to make their quotas. And now there's a class action suit against the Honolulu PD. Yep.
Just ruining lives.
Outrageous.
Just
ruining lives. That's exactly right.
Yeah. That's how you create a place you don't want to live, which is really unfortunate.
Could say that again.
Can I ask you a very tangential question? Is there a precedent, and this is going back to this, for employees having intimate relationships with animals? Because I've heard that's one of the screening questions, and I wanted to know more about that.
Have you seen
not real?
No. Have you seen my previous podcast? Because I actually have a story about that.
Is that right?
No. They don't ask you a question like that. But I think what you may be referring to is, well, I'll start at the beginning. I worked with a guy overseas fantastic guy, great case officer, dear friend. And he had been a polygrapher for 20 years before transferring into operations. And he was a natural operator. So I asked him one time, we were just, the embassy where we were working had a shack in the parking lot that had a bar in it. And we would all go after work and just drink beers in the embassy bar. So I said to him, 20 years as a polygrapher, you must have some crazy stories. And he said that in those 20 years, he had people hooked up to the polygraph machine admit to literally every crime I could imagine, including murder.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's a panic button, under the table where, you press it. And one guy said in his polygraph, I murdered this guy outside Syracuse. And I want you to know that I'm cool with doing wet work. And that's why I want to join this. He's like hitting the panic button so that the cops can come in and take this guy away. But anyway, he said to me one time, he was doing a routine re-poly. You do a polygraph pre-hire after 3 years and then every 5 years for the rest of your career. Okay, so this is just a routine 5-year re-poly for a CIA groundskeeper. Because even the guys who mow the grass and all that stuff, they have to have polygraphs and security clearances. So he said, this guy's just flying right through the thing, no problems of any kind. He's already been at the agency for 10, 12, 13 years, whatever. And the very last question, my friend said, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is important? Something big like murder, rape, robbery, bestiality. The guy goes, what's that last one? He says, bestiality. And my buddy goes,
oh no,
I knew I had him. I knew I had him as soon as he said, what was the last one? And he says, well, you might be surprised to know that's actually far more common than you might think. It's having sex with an animal. And a lot of people do that. Is there anything that you want to say? And he says, I might have done that a couple, 3 times. And so my friend says, okay, well, let's get to the bottom of that. In what circumstances do you find yourself having sex with an animal? And the guy said, well, sometimes
in the barn.
When I get in a fight with my wife, I go out to the barn and I bugger her horse to get back at her. And he's hitting the panic button underneath. He's like, okay, well, thank you. Thanks for your honesty. And of course, they take his badge and escort him out or tell him never come back. So yeah, it's not a common thing at the agency. It is something that they ask about. And every once in a while, you're going to get somebody who says yes.
Man.
I didn't know you had told that story, but I was tipped off by one of our mutual friends. So thanks for indulging that. I had no idea what would come out, man. That was better than I expected.
And it was even more detailed. The guy says he keeps a stepladder out there. So he's got like one of those 3-step ladders, and he gets up on the top. Yeah, it was
he's just
not good.
Well, here's my SOP. Here's the way it goes. You're like, whoa.
I didn't know there's a protocol, man. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of crazy things happening in the world.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, of crazy things happening, did you see that I think it was FBI said they're going to release a video of Epstein having killed himself?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, somebody has been lying to us, right? All along, because we were told years ago there was no video, that the cameras were down.
Right.
Right. And I even went on the record. I wrote a piece saying I didn't believe this was a conspiracy because having been in prison for 2 years myself, I can tell you, number one, everybody has his head up his ass who's working for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Literally everybody. It's like they stand on the street corner in the worst parts of town and shout, hey, anybody here want to be a prison guard? And those are the people they hire. We had trouble at mail call.
Ugh.
We had trouble at mail call because the guards couldn't read. And so they had to have the prisoners read the names.
No way.
and hand out the mail. Yeah, they can't read. So number one, everybody's got his head up his ass. Number two, as a general rule, the cameras are always broken or they're turned off. Always.
Okay.
Number three, the guards are supposed to walk around every 15 minutes and look in every cell and make sure, you're not hanging from a sheet. They never walk around, ever. They sit in the little guard booth, surfing the internet, looking at porn, playing solitaire, whatever. And they were supposed to put Epstein in with, some guy to watch him to make sure that he didn't do it. And I've heard two things. One, that there was nobody in the cell. Or two, that while there was somebody in the cell, that person was an accused serial killer. So it's like...
Okay.
Oof.
Yeah. So now they're telling us they have video and that the video shows them committing suicide. Okay, if you have the video, release the video. Let's see it. I want to see if the hyoid bone was broken by the sheet or the action of his body snapping as he dropped, or if somebody strangled him. Show us if there's a video. What are we waiting for?
Who do you think would have been most highly incentivized to take him out? I know that there's a lot of speculation around who Epstein was connected to, but from where you're sitting, what does it look like?
I personally believe he committed suicide. Just because there's so many moving parts in a conspiracy. They're almost impossible to enact, first. And second, even if you enact them, they're impossible to keep quiet. So I believe facing life without parole, there's no parole in the federal system. He knew he was never going to see the light of day ever again. And because he was a convicted pedophile, he would never be able to serve a single day in a minimum security work camp. So he was done.
Right.
He was done.
Yeah.
He saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
He had no outs.
But to answer your question, I think of all the different factions who have been either implicated or accused of having had some involvement in this whole situation, I think it was the Israelis that had the most to gain taking him out. I was part of a debate.
Why?
Yeah, why is that?
Well, I believe that Epstein was an Israeli access agent. An access agent is a very specific kind of recruited agent. I'll preface
what is
this.
It?
I'll preface it with a story to explain what an access agent is. One of my instructors at the CIA told me once in training that the best recruitment he ever had was a copy machine repairman. And I laughed when he said it. He said, no, hear me out. He said, all of us want to recruit the prime minister, right? None of us are going to recruit a prime minister. Prime ministers aren't recruitable. But copy machine repairmen are recruitable. And eventually the copy machine in the prime minister's office is going to go down. And it's going to need to be cleaned or repaired. And so you recruit the repairman. And he goes into the office of the prime minister to clean the machine, clean the drums, and install a little device that we give him so that every time somebody makes a photocopy, it transmits another copy to CIA headquarters. He said, I got promoted.
Oh my gosh.
I got a medal. I got a photo op with the director. He said it was the best recruitment of my life. Okay, look at Jeffrey Epstein. If the Israelis want to recruit a former president, a British prince, sixth in line to the throne, the founder of Microsoft, you're not going to recruit any of those people. They're not recruitable. But you recruit somebody almost as good. You recruit the guy right next to them. You recruit the guy next to them to whom you give millions of dollars so he can entertain these people at his private island where the rooms are all wired for audio and video. You supply underage girls. You make them your best friends. And then you just turn everything over to us. And we decide what to do with it. That's what an access agent is. And I think that's
They're
exactly
a
what
conduit
he
for
did.
information.
They're a conduit. That's right. Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein, as Jeffrey Epstein, didn't have access to classified information, but everybody around him did.
Right.
And so that's the guy you want.
Sure.
Did. Mm-hmm.
If you get rid of the girls part, the rest of it seems so benign and innocuous. Like, oh, we're just going to a baseball, or we're just doing whatever we do, and we're just hanging out, and I'm paying for it, because I like you.
That's a good point, and it is, and that's a great observation. And if an operation is that banal, you're going to give that guy $1,000 a month, okay? And you're going to meet with him once a month in a coffee shop. And you're going to say, so what fun gossip have you heard this month? And he's going to say, oh, Bill and Hillary Clinton are fighting and they're disagreeing over, Trump's budget cuts. Because who cares? If it's a Jeffrey Epstein situation,
that reminds me,
it's different.
It reminds me of if you ever read Sherlock Holmes, that was always Holmes's intel, is he always had all the homeless kids on the streets. He would pay them all, a nickel or whatever the token was, and they would just scatter around all of London, and then they'd all report back to him on anything that they found, because he's like,
and there's
no one pays attention to those kids, and there is, and they're the ones that can kind of go anywhere, and no one sees them as a threat.
It's interesting to talk about how you understand. It's interesting to think about how you understand how to set up these networks of intelligence, and then to think about you in prison, where there's like this very like no protocol. Were you able to like set up for yourself sort of some infrastructure of figuring out what was going on in different places, or like, because your mind is it's working so fast.
How could you not do that? I guess. Yeah.
Second.
But
I wrote a book,
dude. I think you probably actually said
in longhand. Okay. This is the Greek version. I can't find the American version. Doing Time Like a Spy: How the CIA Taught Me to Survive and Thrive in Prison. So that is exactly what I did, Austin. I decided on my very first day.
Yeah, I want to hear about that.
I was going to use my CIA training to stay safe and to make sure that I remained at the top of the prison social heap. And so the very first thing I did was to form what I called strategic alliances. Those alliances were with, at first, the Aryans, but more importantly with the Italians. Italians named Gambino, Lucchese, Genovese, et cetera, et cetera. And then I wrote in this book, there were 20 life lessons that the CIA taught me that I used in prison to protect myself. Some of them were tongue in cheek, like admit nothing, deny everything, make counter accusations. Some were let others do your dirty work. I'll give you an example. You're going to think less of me, but I think it's a good example anyway. There was this fucking guy.
Bring it.
Oh my God. There was this guy who everybody hated. He just would not shut his mouth all the time. And so he used to date this A-list Hollywood star. He was in People magazine every once in a while. He was just a con man. And he would say, oh, when we get out, you got to come onto my yacht, and we're going to go around the Mediterranean on my giant yacht, and we're going to party at my house in Beverly Hills. He didn't have any of this stuff. It was just all made up. He was a degenerate gambler, and he was just borrowing from this gang to pay that gang, and then he'd lose there and have to borrow from this other guy and pay this other guy. It was just a mess. And I said to one of the Italians one day, I'm going to fuck this guy up. I just cannot stand listening to him anymore. And
he got to you.
Yeah, he got to me. And the Italian's like, are you crazy? You're going to go straight to solitary. And I said, no. You underestimate me. I'm not going to be so crude as to actually fuck him up with my hands. I said, watch and see what I do. Okay, well, when you're being released from prison, there's this form that they give you called a merry-go-round. It lists every office in the prison, and you have to go around on your last day and get a signature. It's completely nonsensical. You're getting out in a day. Really what they want you to do is to spend an entire day just going around, so you don't get in trouble on your last day settling scores. So I asked one of the Italians if he could, yeah. I asked one of the Italians if he could steal a laundry bag for me. So he gave me a laundry bag that he took from laundry. And one of my cellmates was getting out. And I said, Jose, can I borrow your merry-go-round for an hour? He said, yeah, sure. So he gave me the merry-go-round. I whited out, I made a photocopy. I whited out his name and his prisoner number, made a clean photocopy so it looked like an original merry-go-round. I'm going to call this Wallace. That's what I called him in the book. And so I waited until 5 o'clock on Friday, and I put the merry-go-round and the laundry bag on his bed. He comes into the cell. He's like, hey, guys. We said, hey, Wallace, how you doing? He goes over to his bed, and he gasps. I said, what? He goes, I'm being released. I said, what? He says, there's a merry-go-round and my laundry bag. I'm being released. He goes, I must have won my appeal. We're like, holy shit, Wallace, nobody wins their appeals. He says, I have to call my lawyer. Well, even big New York lawyers go home at 5 o'clock on a Friday. So the lawyer's not there. He runs to the unit manager. He's already gone for the day. He runs to the case officer. He's already gone for the day. He comes back to the cell. He's like almost in tears. He's so happy. And the Italian says, Wallace, we got to have a big party for you Sunday night. We're going to have a going away party. He's like, oh, thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you. On Saturday, he gave away all of his possessions. So Sunday comes. Oh, we have the big party for him. Everybody's wishing him well. Monday morning, we all walk with him to R&D, receiving and discharge. It's where they physically open the door and they let you go. He goes into R&D. This is what the R&D guard told us afterwards. He goes into R&D. The R&D guard says, who the hell are you? He says, I'm Wallace. What are you doing here? He said, I'm going home. He hands him the merry-go-round. The guy looks at the merry-go-round. He says, turn around. You're under arrest. He goes, for what? Attempted escape. So they cuff him. Oh my gosh. They cuff him. They take him to solitary. He spends 2 weeks there, and then they transfer him to another prison. So I heard later that they never charged him with attempted escape because they couldn't prove that he had doctored the merry-go-round. I had. But we never saw him again.
Oh, yeah.
And I told one of the big guys, the maid guys, I said, I told you I was going to fuck that guy up. I thought he would never shut his mouth. That's what the CIA taught me to do.
Whoa.
Dude.
You took his soul.
Wow.
Yeah, you didn't try to break his face. You crushed his spirit.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's incredible, man. How did who are you most allied with, and what did that gain you more respect?
Oh yeah. Once word got out that I was with the Italians, nobody dared lift a finger against me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm still in touch with them.
Are these guys still connected to like a mafia?
Oh yeah. In fact, one of them is a boss today. One of the 5 families' bosses.
Oh.
Whoa. Yeah. What's the relationship between the mafia and the CIA right now these days? What's the haps with that relationship? Because I don't hear much about the mafia down here in North Carolina, you know?
No, and I imagine you don't. Non-existent in my experience. Quite close in the 1960s. Okay. Yeah, quite close. But not with the mafia in general.
So are they enemies?
Specific.
Or are they...
No, they're not enemies. They're... The CIA's involvement with the mafia, of course, goes back to about 1959 when Castro took control of Cuba. And the involvement was very specifically with Santo Traficante Sr., who was the boss of Tampa in South Florida. We now know, thanks to mob rats and declassified documents, that Trafficante happily took this money, pretended to move against Castro, and really never did anything. He just lied to just kept the money. And there are credible reports that Trafficante and the boss of New Orleans may have had some involvement, maybe peripheral, maybe more direct, in the JFK. But
yeah, when you said that
the extent,
the last connection was in the 60s.
Yeah.
That was the first thing that came to mind was, oh, well, that's interesting, because that's when JFK was having his issues with, it seems like, both and the mob. So it could have put him on the same side for a little while too.
Now the has this love-hate relationship with the mob. The hate is well known, of course. It's up to the FBI to break the mob. But then, there's kind of a famous story. Well, it's famous to me. I don't know why most Americans don't know it. There was a notorious mob hit named Greg Scarpa. Greg Scarpa was born and raised in Staten Island and was a major figure. He started off as a low-level, crook with the Gambinos, and became a hit that you could really count on. I've read that he killed as many as 120 people on behalf of the mob. Wow. He was asked by the FBI. Do you remember reading about Freedom Summer in 1963, where these northern kids, these 18, 19, they went to Mississippi to register black voters, and three of them, Chapman, I forget their two Jewish kids and a black kid, they were kidnapped and murdered in Mississippi during Freedom Summer, and they were buried in an earthen dam. Well, the FBI assumed that they were dead. The FBI assumed that the Klan had killed them, but they didn't have access to the Klan that would have allowed them to find the bodies and to make a prosecution. So the FBI went to Greg Scarpa and said, can you go down to Mississippi for us and find these kids' bodies? Scarpa went down. He approached one of the Klansmen that the FBI believed was involved and said, hey, I'm from New York. I need to know where these kids are. The Klansman told him, go fuck himself. And so Scarpa shot him in the leg and kidnapped him and tortured him to within an inch of his life. Shot him repeatedly.
Dang. Carved
him up. Finally, the guy said, they're in an earthen dam at this location. He told the FBI. They went, they found all three of the bodies. That made Scarpa a hero in the FBI. So there were two factions within the FBI. One loved Greg Scarpa. The other wanted Greg Scarpa to spend the rest of his life in prison or maybe get the electric chair. And so what ended up happening was Scarpa's handler in the FBI became so enamored with him that he ended up providing inside information to Scarpa about what the FBI was doing, where the bugs were located, who was watching him, when the surveillance was on him, that allowed Scarpa to evade and to elude for the next 25 years. In the end, and this is kind of the crazy part of the story. Yeah. It was a very clear quid pro quo. Absolutely, yes. Here's the craziness of the story. Scarpa was in an accident when he was young, and he struggled with chronic pain. And so he would take aspirins every single day. Some people would say he would take as many as 10 aspirins at a time and just down aspirins all day long with coffee. As you can imagine, it ate a hole right through his stomach. And so he had a significant bleed from an ulcer to the point where he needed an emergency blood transfusion. But Scarpa hated black people. So when they took him to the hospital, he said he didn't want any black blood. It had to be Italian blood. Only Italian blood was what he would accept. And he was dying. He was bleeding to death internally. And so his driver said, I'm Italian. They're the same blood type. Take my blood and transfuse it into Scarpa. What nobody knew was that the driver used anabolic steroids. He was a power lifter, and he used anabolic steroids.
Oh no!
And he was HIV positive from the needle.
Oh my God!
And so he passed HIV to Scarpa. 2 years later, Scarpa is in full-blown AIDS and ended up dying of AIDS. Once it became apparent that he had AIDS and not stomach cancer, which is what he told everybody in the Gambino family, they cut him off. They cut him off, and they ended up prosecuting the FBI handler who had been passing Scarpa all that information. Now he's buried with a little teeny tiny stone. He's buried next to his son, who was killed in a bad deal at 27. They're buried together in Staten Island. I was just there a couple of weeks ago for doing book research for my next book.
Wow. So there's not
Incredible.
many John Kiriakus in the world who get to go and sit and have dinner with like with a mob boss. If you go and have dinner with someone like that, what's it like? Like, are you on edge at all? Do you
like
think
last week
he's on edge at all, or is it just? Yeah, like last week. Yeah, what's the feeling? Like, do you have to get patted down? I mean, what's it actually like to have dinner with someone like that?
It is wonderful. I went up. I won't even say to where. I went up to the northeast of Washington and to see a buddy of mine who's a made guy. And I love him like a brother. I'm telling you, I love the guy. And we're in constant touch. And he said, hey, I want you to have dinner with somebody. So we go into town, and I recognize the guy. He's the boss, like the actual boss. And my friend said, I told him all about you, and he wants to have dinner, just the three of us. We took pictures together. We had dinner. We traded stories. And no, it was just, we walked in, we sat down. We didn't even order. Like, the owner of the restaurant just came up with plate after plate after plate of food, and nobody paid any money. You know, it was just...
It was just like the movies.
Great.
It actually is like the movies.
Yeah, it was great. I texted my brother.
In Mexico, it's very...
I'm sorry. I texted my brother, and I said, you're not going to believe who I'm having dinner with. And I told him who. And he says, are you out of your fucking mind? And I said, no, these are my friends. They're great.
Yeah. And it's not so odd here in Mexico because it's, the cartel is very integral to a lot of places' form of governance. And so it's very common parlance for people to say everything is a mafia. And if you're talking about the taxi drivers in Cancun, that's a mafia. You're talking about one of the governments of the world, that's a mafia. And so when you really think, humans have to organize in different ways. Sometimes it doesn't work out that it's going to be penned by a lawyer, and you can still be friends with everyone. I think that's really cool, actually.
And one of the things about the Italian, though, compared to some of these other groups or organizations, is the importance of personal honor. This is really the overriding reason why I felt so close to these guys. They were extraordinarily honorable. I'll give you an example. I was there was a captain.
Does that mean honest? What does that mean to you?
No, it doesn't necessarily
mean honest or trustworthy or loyal? Yeah, how do you define that? Or in this situation?
Loyal, trustworthy, yes. Honest, no, I'm not going to say honest. But I'll give you this example. I'll give you two examples. There was a senior captain of one of the 5 families. I lived directly across the hall from him. And when I finished my New York Times, I'd give the Times to him. And he finished his New York Post. He would give the Post to me. And we would sit next to each other in the cafeteria, and we'd watch football on Sundays. We were friends. So we're in his cell one day, and it's like 8 of us. And one of the really junior guys came in, and he's holding his shirt out like this. And his shirt is just full of candies and peanuts and chips and all kinds of snacks. And he starts handing them out, tossing them out. And the captain says, where'd you get all this? And he said, I broke into that Chomo's locker. Chomo's a child molester. I broke into that Chomo's locker and I stole all of it. And he said, you stole all of it? Put all this shit back right now, he says. And the guy says, why? He said, if you want to take the Chomo shit, you look him in the eye and you say, Chomo, open your locker and give me all your shit. You don't do it behind his back. Put all that shit back. Yeah. And he put all of it back. And I was like, wow.
That's
okay. That's oddly honorable. But another thing was, I had real problems with this one particular guard, this woman. And I gave as well as I took, but she was an ongoing problem to me. And multiple times I caught her in violation of the rules, like swearing at me. She threw something at me once. These are fireable offenses. And I mentioned, I'm going to file a complaint against this bitch and I'm going to get her fired. And one of the Italians said, no, you can't do that. And I said, why not? He said, we consider that to be ratting. And I said, ratting? But I'm not like giving any information. He said, yeah, but you can't rat her out. That makes you a rat. And I said, okay, so I just take it. He said, take it, but you back with her. Give it back to her. But yeah, you can't rat her out. And I said, okay. So I didn't.
None of that's allowed to be present inside of you. They just won't allow it. It's because if you do that to her, then they're afraid, you might have some of those feelings towards someone else around here, and you might get, so they just have to squash that before you act on it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. Dang, prison sounds like a crazy time. Actually, I'm trying to get a hold of someone that left a comment that said he was.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I said that in this book that prison is a combination of 7th grade, Lord of the Flies, and a mental institution.
Yeah, wow.
It is.
Dang, a lot of the things you say about it are how people describe Trump. Like he has sort of an honor code, but it's not exactly like by the letter of the law.
Right.
It kind of is. Yeah. Maybe he grew up in that ilk around. I guess he grew up in New York. Like maybe there was some influence in his upbringing. I have no idea.
He was the biggest construction magnate in Manhattan. He was mobbed up to his chin. His lawyer was Roy Cohn. He was the mob lawyer.
Right.
He's no rat. I'll tell you that.
He's no rat.
Wow. So he probably does abide by those principles as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh. He was immersed in it all of his life.
I have a question. I have a question regarding, you mentioned when we chatted 2 times ago, actually, when we first met you, I had a question because I don't get to talk to many people who have spent as much time or any time in the CIA as you. And you had mentioned that, I said, how, or could there be, you went over the entire structure of the CIA and how it's kind of decentralized and there's these blobs and I asked whether it would be possible to have a secret department that nobody else knows about. And you kind of mentioned that maybe it wasn't very possible or highly likely because of the campus and everybody's eating lunches together and information just gets swapped. And I kind of wanted to, I've been thinking about that for a few months and I just want to ask, like, is it possible in this world, it seems like it's part of a feature of the CIA to be the boogeyman. Like they get blamed for so many things, and I don't think they're to blame for probably 99% of them. But how could there not be a possibility that there's maybe like one department with one guy, and then there's a government contractor that gets $100 billion, and it's sort of like off campus? Like, I know we're kind of shifting gears a little bit. No, I keep trying to get my bearings around how this works, because I just still don't understand. They look like the boogeyman intentionally, I think, but they're not all the time. And so how can there be transparency all the way across to where someone can have some kind of degree of confidence outside of just a conspiracy level of doubt, that it's all low. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah.
And you're right. It is possible to have an entity within that nobody knows about, other than the director, the deputy director, the executive director, and then either the deputy director for operations or the deputy director for science and technology, let's say. And this has increased in size probably 50, 60% since 9/11. And so not everybody is on campus anymore. Now there are satellite facilities all over the Washington area, all over the place. Some of them are secure facilities. Some of them are little offices just tucked in with a million other offices. You know, you look on a signboard and it says, you know, ABC Import Export Company. Well, what the heck is that? Oh, it's actually pretty likely it's a front company. It doesn't have any employees. Nobody's ever in there. Or if there is somebody in there, it's one person or two people. So yeah, that's absolutely possible. But the thing is that, yeah, go ahead.
Well, the thing that I think about that is since you have all the experience inside this, let's say you see a building with this nondescript company. Yeah, what would you do to find out or to get any extra information around, is that operating by like, what's a way you could work your way in, because you've been one, like how would you evaluate that?
I wouldn't. There are some things. No, okay. There are some programs that are so highly classified or highly compartmentalized. I didn't have a need to know, and I didn't dare ask. When I was the executive assistant to the CIA's deputy director for operations, for a period of 1 year, I had access to literally everything that the CIA was doing around the world. And it was an eye-opener, right? And then at the end of that year, when I moved on to my next assignment, I lost my need to know. My clearances weren't any lower, but I didn't have the need to know. And so I was removed from all of those compartments. Well, that's how a lot of people are. Depending on whether or not you need to know for the purpose of performing your job, that's what determines whether or not you have access. But there were many times, for example, where I'd go into a building in, Tyson's Corner, Virginia, and I'd see one of these import-export companies, and you kind of look in the little window on the side of the door, and you're like, yeah, that's probably one of ours. But it's none of my business, and so I never said a word.
Yeah, that really leaves it open to the boogeyman. I mean, that's basically, it just becomes a label. I mean, you almost could just slap on anywhere, or not. It's so hard to keep track of. It seems very it just seems like there's not much accountability. I'm trying to figure out how to.
No, you know why?
Seems like it can run away. After 50 years, it can run away. Yeah,
it can. But there are two responses to that. You make an important point here. But number one, the CIA doesn't give a shit what people believe they do or don't do. They don't care one iota. Number two, the only people that they care about informing are the members of the House and Senate oversight committees. So long as they know, they don't care if nobody else on the planet knows. And they don't care that so many people accuse them of being involved in one conspiracy or another. They just don't care.
So it's not even about keeping it secret. They just don't care. They're just going about their business. And I mean, not that they're open, but it's irrelevant whether people suspect it or not. And maybe sometimes it's helpful to get a little bit of rumors going and this kind of thing. It just gives a little bit more cloud to the whole mystery behind it.
And that's why they never comment on anything. Like literally anytime a reporter goes to the Office of Public Affairs and asks for a comment, they just say no comment. Or if you go to the Office of Public Affairs and say, hey, can you send me any information you may have on A, B, or C? They give you what's called a GLOMAR response, GLOMAR. We can neither confirm nor deny the existence of any information pertaining to your question.
If things were to go south, let's say you did try to whistleblow and you had to get off the grid, and I want to point out a book that you wrote, which is How to Disappear and Live Off the Grid. Where would you physically go? What would be like, how would you get there, and where would be your number one destination if you just accidentally...
What are the geo coordinates?
Yes.
yeah. Can you drop us a geocache of where you're going to hide out?
Well, I say in that book how difficult it is to actually disappear and live off the grid. You have to be prepared to tough it out. And when I say tough it out, I mean no phone, no internet, no credit cards. So you've got to be well prepared. You can buy these cash cards. Like you have a Visa card that you put $500 on it and you treat it as a credit card, but no phone and no internet, which is very hard. And then you're going to have to...
No phone. You can't even get a burner somehow? I guess they're all tracking it. Yeah, even a burner phone.
But it'll be intercepted. Even if just, remotely by a computer, it's going to be intercepted. So you really have to go off the grid. Now, it depends, too, whether you just want to be off the grid and left alone or whether you're escaping criminal prosecution. So if they're actively searching for you, the chances are pretty good that you're going to make one mistake at some point and they're going to find you. If you just want to go off the grid, that's far, far easier. You can go to... Yeah. You're going to have to leave the United States, but
Wyoming.
You can go to, Baja, or, go to East Asia someplace, go to Thailand, or, places that have expat communities, but they're expats that want to be left alone.
One reason I ask is because, do you remember Matthew Livelsberger, who blew up the Tesla in front of the Trump Tower?
Yes.
I'd been on YouTube, like Sean Ryan and some of the ex-Navy SEALs, they've been speculating that that wasn't his body. And I've been wondering, like, man, if he was in the area and now we know this event happened and we know he was at least close because he rented a Tesla nearby, how do you get out of there and where would you go? And a lot of them were saying he came to Mexico, and I'd really like to find him if he's here. But I was kind of wondering, I just wanted to ask you, like, where could he go anywhere? Could he get out of the United States after doing something like that? Or would it be locked down?
He could get out of the United States. That's the easy part. The easy part is crossing a border, because most of the border is unprotected. You go 20 or 30 miles outside of a border crossing and it's just desert. You just drive your four-wheeler across the border. The hard part is remaining in Mexico unmolested. So I think one of the things that most Americans don't realize is just how closely the Mexicans cooperate with the Americans on these criminal justice issues. It's like the Mexican police are extensions of the FBI. And so it's almost impossible to commit a crime in the United States, get to Mexico, and remain in Mexico unscathed. The Mexicans are very, very good at tracking people down and extraditing them. Now, if this was, I'm going to be really conspiratorial here. If this was an operation where he did this explosion in front of Trump, the Trump hotel, I guess it was, and there was, let's say, some random homeless guy's body inside, and it wasn't his body, but this was part of a government operation, and the government helped him get to Mexico, then sure, you can live happily ever after. Nobody's going to bother you. It has relationships with, localities and with states and with, other countries where they can come up with any documents you need to live, a free and easy life. They can gin up a foreign passport. They can give you a driver's license. They can give you a social security card. They can do whatever they want. But if you're doing it to escape justice, man, you've got to look over your shoulder for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah. Oh, that'd be tough. You would need to have some very good survival instincts. I guess if Matthew Levelsberger was ex-Special Forces, he would have those instincts, but it would still be tough. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or lonely. I mean, what a life to live from that point forward. It's, what are we doing?
The witness protection program is one thing, but the witness protection program on your own in a foreign country is an entirely different thing.
Yeah, go to a small town, marry a woman, settle down, never look back. I think that's the move.
Yeah.
Did you see what was going on in the Netherlands just today, I think, or yesterday, where the far right, the PVV, he stepped down and then the prime minister just quit?
Yeah.
Or resigned?
The whole government collapsed.
Yeah, what's your take on... Yeah, the government's collapsed in the Netherlands. And what's going on there? I mean, I was trying to read around it, but do you have an opinion on what's happening?
The Netherlands is a microcosm of the rest of the European Union in that there is no issue more important than immigration. It's the overriding issue right now. And that's why a far right-wing candidate was elected over the weekend in Poland. It's for the same reason. There are a lot of refugees in the Netherlands, a lot. And there are a lot of Dutch citizens who are just tired of all these people moving into their country. And they're not assimilating. They continue to speak Arabic or Kurdish or Farsi or whatever.
That's right.
And they're not really becoming members of Dutch society. And so there's been this right-wing reaction to either clamp down on immigration or to even push some of the immigrants and refugees back out again. You know, the Netherlands is about that big. It's not like Germany that can absorb thousands or tens of thousands of these people. It's a very small place. And so I think we're going to see more of this. You know, we're already seeing it in Greece, where there's a neo-Nazi party that's actually gotten itself elected to parliament. Not even neo-Nazi, it's actually Nazi that's gotten itself elected to parliament. We're seeing it in Moldova. We're seeing it in Poland, in Hungary. It's happening all over the place. There's already a right-wing prime minister in Italy. Macron almost lost his race the last time he ran in France.
Have you seen? I saw that Elon. He retweeted. He called it the Great Dying because it was a whole map of Western Europe and their replacement rates. And, you know, you need a 2.1 replacement rate to keep your population even for every couple because they replace themselves, and 0.1 accounts for accidents and those sorts of things. And all of Western Europe is like 1.1, 1.4, I mean, they're so low. And Elon did the math, and he's like, well, in 3 generations, it's about 7% of the population. If it actually does, it halves and then halves and then halves. And so there really is a population, and the economic impacts of that is just gonna be something like we've never seen before. It's the reverse of growth to have that just quantity of bodies decreasing. And so that also makes me think that because they're not replacing themselves, the population has to be disproportionately older. There aren't that many young people because they haven't replaced themselves. And so there is this kind of vacuum. And I don't mean that means, you know, this is a complicated issue, but they definitely seem tied that if Europe doesn't incentivize some sort of growth, whether birth rates increase or immigration in some way that everybody appreciates and can enjoy and doesn't ruin, you know, the ways of life, then Europe is kind of dying anyways, right? Like as an influence and a lot of these things, they just seem kind of, maybe that's the reaction to the whole far right wing thing, is that there's not enough people to go around, and so others are coming in. What do you think about sort of the contrast between the Great Dying of how they're not really replacing themselves and then all these immigrants being brought in?
Yeah, I saw that tweet. And I can give you as an example, Greece went into economic freefall in 2008, and it took them about 10 years to get out of it. But in that 10-year period, 1.2 million Greeks left the country. They went to the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, Germany.
They'll chase opportunity.
They have to. They have to, or they starve.
Right.
But then at the same time, Greece was the destination for Nigerians, Somalis, Kurds, Pakistanis, Afghans, Palestinians. I was in Greece 3 weeks ago, and I did not realize until 3 weeks ago that there's an Arab neighborhood now in Athens where all the signs are in Arabic. All the restaurants are Arab restaurants.
Wow.
Everybody was speaking Arabic. I mean, 10 years ago, Athens developed this little teeny Chinatown that I thought it was kind of quaint. But I'm talking about a whole major section of central Athens that's just Arab. That's happening all over Europe.
They're chasing opportunity too, right?
They are.
I mean, they're going somewhere that's better than where they're coming from too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask this? I have a different take on this, and just to paint the light of how I see things. I come from technology. Like my first project I ever did was for Lockheed Martin. I actually had a clearance when I was like 21. And the way that I look at politicians is like sometimes there are politicians who see technical curves coming and they plan for it. Usually politicians I don't think are that forward looking. I think they're mostly dealing with fires.
I agree with that.
In the moment.
Yes.
But I wonder, is anyone actually looking and saying, there's AI robots coming and that's real and they will be able to do manual labor. And so maybe immigrants, maybe we want immigrants because they do labor, but they pay taxes, and AI might not. But maybe we just don't need immigration to backfill jobs like that. Is that a conversation that you're hearing anyone talk about? Like, there are AI robots coming and they will be doing labor.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I was talking on a podcast earlier today about how we need fewer and fewer soldiers, because what we're seeing happening between Ukraine and Russia right now with the use of drones is in some cases going to make ground troops obsolete, right? And then at the same time, DARPA is developing one of these Black Mirror style, robots.
That's right.
To be the ground troops of the future. So yeah, it's not like we're going to even need those people in the military after a while. I think, Austin, that's a really good.
It's a capital game.
It is. It's all about capital, right? And I think that governments are not taking that into consideration when they're looking at population. We actually don't need all these people.
Yeah, and that is a shift from growth at all costs. I mean, I think we topped out at 8 billion people in the world, and I don't know how long it'll take humanity to get back to 8 billion. It does sort of feel like we've grown to 8 billion globally. And I know there's, depending on where you are, there's growth and decline. But I think net around the world, we've started to decline in population. And, I think that maybe it's sort of changing mindsets and shifting into, since it's, we all grew and life got great because of economic growth, but maybe there's some new era that we're moving into as an entire globe around, we're actually going to contract in size. And so what do we do there? How do we, our whole monetary system is based upon growth. And so with a huge contraction like that globally, I mean, it's inevitable. We're going to have ripple effects of, it's like, I think of cities start out here and then they build concentric circles as the population grows and you get suburbs, just like a mold or a fungus. And I think as the populations decline, they're going to contract back down, maybe back to the cities, maybe, unless we all go out to, compounds. But you can see that growth. And I think we're just inevitably starting to decline, and we're seeing everybody's reaction to that, depending on what culture you're in and what country you're in.
Yeah.
Do you have a thought or a framework that you evaluate the future in a post-human intelligence? Like when we're not even close to the smartest things on Earth, have you thought about or do you just have a framework you're working in, and like what happens to money? How does society go about, like, do the robots have to police the streets? Like, how does this play out in your mind?
I actually haven't given it much thought. I think we probably all should. But I haven't given it much thought. I'm still amazed when I see one of these robots delivering a pizza. Well, every time I go visit my son, he goes to Miami of Ohio. I'm just amazed with these robots going down the sidewalk carrying food, and then the robot says, "Excuse me." Last time I was there, the robot got stuck on a curb, and it says, "Can you help me?" And I kind of pushed it up over the curb. It goes, "Thank you," and then it goes and delivers the pizza. We actually, this is a good point you make. We should be having this national conversation about how far we want to take this, because you're right. It's like iRobot all of a sudden, and it's going to make the rest of us obsolete. And then what do we do? How do you earn a living if the robots are doing all the work
quickly? Yeah,
very, very quickly.
Very quickly.
And Keynesian economics is based upon, a currency is based upon a unit of labor. That's kind of like where it all started, was that an hour of labor or a unit of labor as you're working, that represents some piece of paper that now we trade for other things.
Yes.
And if you do the math on robots, and if robots can do everything, and we have, let's say, solar power to recharge them, that is, in the equation, that is infinite labor. We have infinite free labor. And so in the equation of money, that actually makes money obsolete in the equation. In the long run. And so what does the society look like in an obsolescence where money is obsolete. It doesn't even mean anything anymore, because if robots can just add an extension onto my house and garden for me and do anything, then like, what do I need money for? If everybody just has robots to do everything, it's a real fundamental shift. And I think, to Austin's point, it's coming quickly, like so fast. I don't think everybody's ready for it.
What do you, if I could ask you a question, how do you see this playing out in terms of the international monetary system? Do we convert to Bitcoin? I mean, what do we do about money? I already don't carry cash ever. I don't need to carry cash. I don't know anybody anymore that carries cash. And, you know, it's like, I'm going to make kind of a stupid analogy.
I give the homeless guys with Venmo. I see them. Yeah, they hold up their phone and they take Venmo. And I actually will Venmo homeless people $20.
I do too. Venmo and Cash App. They all take it. All of it.
Sure.
So do we, I mean, are we moving in the direction of one international currency? Presumably, well, we've got the euro already and the dollar, but presumably the BRICS companies or countries rather are talking about a unified currency. Is that the direction we go to, or do we go to Bitcoin, or do we go to some other international system? I don't know.
I personally think it goes to Bitcoin. I think that game theory forces everyone, because you have a situation right now where one player can print money and the rest can't, or you know, you have a few currencies that people can print that everyone else values. Everyone else that can print doesn't have a currency anyone values, and so you'll always have like the bottom. The way that I had seen it for the last like 5 or 6 years, and this is why I got into Bitcoin, was I thought there's always gonna be a bottom third who's just the disadvantaged group. It's like small countries who, you know, like Japan, they buy US bonds, but they can't print any US dollars. So every time there's printed US dollars, it devalues what they hold. So they don't want to play that game forever. And I know that they're under the thumb of the US, so they like have to for now. But eventually countries like that are going to say like, man, we would just want a fair game. I just want to play on a fair field, you know, like let all the players think of their best entrepreneurs and come up with their best ideas and grow their economies how they will. But at some point, we just need to play a fair game. And it's not fair when the US and China can print stuff, but we can't.
Yeah. The libertarian in me, I really loved, you know, Mises and his sort of economic outlook. But because we've been on Keynesian economics with fiat currencies for so long, and they have to inflate because of growth. It's all predicated on growth. It's predicated upon growth always. So, and then also a unit of labor is representative of the currency. And we're just totally moving past that. But then you got Mises, who's talking about the gold standard and some of these things. But I think that becomes irrelevant also. And so, to what Austin's saying, I mean, the great part about Bitcoin is that it's decentralized. And so, but there is no inflation. In fact, there's huge deflation in Bitcoin. People lose their computers and get locked out of their keys, and you use them. And so I don't know what it looks like to live with a currency that's in a deflationary, that has deflation baked into its math. Like that, that also seems problematic. No, we've never lived through the what was it? William Jennings Bryan, "Don't crucify me on a cross of gold" in like 1898 with the farmers. Like we can complain about inflation, but we've never felt deflation like Americans have 130 years ago. And so the money going up or down is not great.
We do have to move to like a UBI system though, because if like we always thought robots were going to come for blue collar work first, but it's come for white collar first. Like if you're a lawyer, I mean, I'm dating someone who's a lawyer right now, and she says I can use ChatGPT to produce something just as good as probably better than what I could produce. Well, if white collar is going first, and then we have Tesla bots rolling out in 2 years, then blue collar goes like, how do any of us make money? We've got to have UBI of some sort.
Or we all just issued like 10 robots each. I mean, if everybody gets 10 robots, right? And now all of a sudden that's kind of like, and you can survive forever. Like you got 10 robots and the internet. I mean, is there some basic, it is kind of UBI, but rather than issuing money every month, and it might be money because there's always some liquidity of oil that needs to be able to like slosh around the system. We can't like trade robots. So there is going to be some sort of proxy for value, but like as its baseline, maybe compute power becomes the currency. And you actually kind of, I feel like we're seeing countries compete for that right now. If you see what China's doing with solar to create electricity, I mean, when I saw all of the tech billionaires start to invest in nuclear, that's when I knew. Because they did the math, they've got all their teams on it, and all their teams come back and go, yeah, just for our stuff, we need like 100 times the output of the whole country of the United States. And so instantly I start hearing about Zuckerberg and OpenAI, Altman, and everybody, and they're all investing in nuclear companies because we have an energy crisis. So like the scarcity at this point isn't money. The scarcity is compute power, which is powered by electricity. So we're almost going back to the ones and zeros of electron movement, and that becomes the currency more so than a piece of paper, I think.
I think what we're missing going into this phase is like, we don't know what basic human rights means, because so let's say robots are essentially everywhere and they can build a house in a day if you want. They can make a garden for you, they can raise food for you, but like, what's the basic level that everybody gets? Does everybody get a robot that grows their food, or is it still just going to be the rich people, even though everyone could have one? I don't know. Well, but we've really got to figure it out, because it's blazing at us right now. I feel like it's coming so fast.
There's a book, it's called like The History of Money. What was that guy's name? And he basically shows, as the disparity grows, like, you want a healthy middle class, but it's also because of stability. Because wealth inevitably and always concentrates up. And it doesn't have to be, the cool part about America is you can theoretically work your way into being into that class, versus previously you were just born into a class and you'd never go up at the socioeconomic ladder. But regardless of who's in where in the flow of those people, wealth typically and always in history has concentrated to the wealthy. And once it hits a tipping point, the pitchforks come out, because it's just too much. And so it's up to the wealthy class, or at least this is an idea, is that it's up to the wealthy class to make sure that it doesn't concentrate so much that the pitchforks come out. It's almost like a feature of humanity that as soon as the power concentrates too much, you get an uprising. And so, but I don't know.
You know, the difference this time is it will cost nothing to squelch the uprising. I think it's quite possible that we leave a bunch of people out, they go grab the pitchforks, and then the robots just fend them off. And it's like, you're out.
Yeah,
sorry.
We're to the point where you need like 100 people and you need like $100 million, and you have a better army than everybody in the world almost. Or, you're at a competitive level of an army with like 100 people. I mean, it really is going to, and maybe that's hyperbolic, but not by that much. And so it's really a capital gain. So now capital is rewarding. If capital becomes the defense of power, because you can deploy drones and robots, it really can be dystopian in some scenarios. But it's weird to see, I don't know, and our population's declining. I mean, globally, these macro issues are so wild to watch them play out. And obviously every country is doing what they can with their resources and their people and those things. But it's a strange time. It's like we're becoming more, we have more stuff and more opportunity and more good things than ever before. And yet somehow it's sort of moving in a way that it seems destructive for some reason.
Yeah, man, I get concerned that right now everything's taking exponential curves, like our technology development, intelligence development, money accumulation development. It's nothing's linear in this universe. Like, it's some sort of fractal is exponential, or it's probably sigmoid. It levels off in a logarithmic way. And I feel like everyone might just be jockeying for which curve they're going to ride up. And because we're all just hoping we get to ride a curve up and that the robots don't kill us all. And so I see these people, I feel like they're trying to get their money invested in this, or they're trying to create enough energy so they can outpace everybody else, because they know once I have super intelligence, I start compounding faster than everyone who doesn't have it. And it could be a moment like that. So I think we're all just jockeying for our survival spots right now. That's how I feel. It sounds extreme, but I can't avoid it.
I'm not sure that's a future I want to live in. And now I almost regret like sticking my 5 kids in it. At least I've replaced myself.
Yeah. Well, there's a chance. There's a chance. We got, that's why we talk. And that's why, like, honestly, Matt and I could sit and not do anything. But the reason we do stuff is because, like, I don't want that future either, man. We got to talk about stuff and figure stuff out. And there's a lot of hard work left to be done.
But I think we talked about this the other day, that there was this notion, and maybe it still exists for some people, that when your kid grows up, that they have to start out from scratch, and that's the honorable and noble thing to do. And how the honorable thing is to train up your kid and then go, here you go, start with 0 and go make something of yourself. Right. But I just think at the sake, I guess the caution there is maybe we're going to give them a silver spoon and they don't work hard because there's this like Protestant work ethic still sort of built into our culture. But we're moving to a part where everyone doesn't have to work. Like, we have enough resources and the robots are going to do it all. We actually don't have to work.
Awesome.
The robots can do everything for us. And it's so awesome if you look at it in that light. But if we still have to look at everybody and judge everybody for how much work they do and how hard they work, and that your measure of how much money you've achieved is a measure of how hard you've worked in your life, like, the robots are going to do it all for us. So it feels like we need to like change our mindset as to what is a meaningful life, what creates a life of purpose, because it used to be toil because life was hard and people are dying of cavities because we couldn't drill them out and they'd get to their brain, but that doesn't exist anymore. So like, labor is not that valuable anymore. Robots can do it all or on their way to doing all of it.
I get the sense we were born for this moment, actually, because humans have the ability to create a purpose that's just arbitrary, but it's out of our hearts and our minds. Like Matt and I just recently interviewed the whale SETI people. They're actively trying to talk to whales. It's like, we need to have goals like that now, because you don't need to have a goal of going to work at 9 to 5. That's just not going to exist. But you haven't spoken to whales yet. It's like, let the curiosity just overwhelm you. We can go to Mars. We can go to all sorts of places. We can go to the bottoms of the oceans finally. I think it's time for us to be building these purposes into kids.
And it should be unifying. We shouldn't be fighting over resources. There's so many resources for everybody that I don't understand, and robots are just going to make more of them, that I don't know why we should be holding that back from everybody. But I get the downside of what's happened when we try that, because this is not an easy fix. But it's just pointing out where we're going, that our underlying basis of like labor is a unit of measure and inflation is always good. Those are not true anymore, actually. Right. And so it's weird. We got to go somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah, this is going to be... I've been really grappling with whether or not humans have already cracked like free energy and anti-gravity tech. From my research so far, it seems like most likely it's been done. And I kind of see now why it's been hidden. I think it's because it's actually not super hard to do. Like, you have to understand a little bit about probably voltages, and you have to have a little lab, but I don't think you need a big lab. And so I think they bought us a little time by not putting, because they like Colonel Thomas Bearden, some of these ex-military guys have mentioned, like, there's enough energy to create something that would make the hydrogen bomb look like a child's toy, just in a small amount of space. And if everyone knew how to draw it out of there, it would just be mayhem. And so I think they bought us some time just because the human psyche needs to develop a little bit. Like, we need to think about bigger purposes and see ourselves as part of a bigger universe. But I wonder if we can keep the genie in the bottle when it comes to AI, because it really feels like that one's leaked out and it's just going. It's rampant.
I'm worried about AI.
Yeah, and the people who know about it are using it.
Yeah, that's right. And using it very successfully. Like, I've been trying to tinker with it.
Yeah.
I actually don't really like it so much yet because it lies to me. But my son...
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it keeps insisting that I graduated from the University of Maryland and some school in Belgium that I never heard of. And I said, you're wrong.
Who are you to question AI, John?
Yeah, and then the AI says, no, you're wrong. John Kiriakou graduated from the University of Maryland. I'm like, I don't even know where that is, besides being in Maryland.
Yeah, we're slowly developing a brain, aren't we? Like, right now, it's a brain without a default mode network.
That's right.
'Cause right now, our default mode network kind of keeps everything, and it makes it so I can't smell the color red, and all of my senses don't hallucinate. Literally, the default mode network keeps you from hallucinating. And right now, our AIs are hallucinating. So I think there are some smart engineers working on... I actually think we should take our brain and the way we operate, and I think this is what they do, and sort of extrapolate, well, how do we do it, and how can we programmatically build that to stop hallucinating? Because one part of the brain can hallucinate, and that's a feature, not a bug. And so we need another part of the brain. It's a complex system that helps keeps the hallucinations in check. And so I think we're in the process of building a brain, but it's like going to be more powerful than any single brain that's ever existed.
Yes.
And so I don't know. Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I don't know.
Dang,
but it's scary.
we just went into the ultimate of rabbit holes.
Yeah.
It is scary.
At least we'll
It
know,
should be uniting
when
too,
the
though, because
robots,
it's bigger than all of us.
when the robot's blue light turns red, then we know we have to fight them, right? At least there's that.
Yeah. I'm just calling Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, man, you jump with this. You know how to
keep him alive.
Will Smith.
What would you do? What would Arnold do? You know?
Oh, John, before we wrap up, is like, I realized as I was trying to prepare questions, I was like, dude, you're interviewing the guy who's the smartest at questions. Why don't you just ask him what to ask? Is there anything that you would like to be asked, or you haven't been asked in a while, that you just like to talk about? I know you got to go pretty soon, but
that I haven't been asked in a while.
Or just something you have a hankering to talk about.
What have you been noodling on? Yeah.
What I've been noodling on is, I'm kind of Washington famous, and I don't know how to turn that into a living. That's a very selfish response.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a very selfish response.
Yeah.
But, I travel constantly, okay? And yesterday, I'm going through the airport, and one of the TSA guys points at me and says, "Hey, YouTube's hey guy." And I was like, "Yeah, great. How do I monetize that?" I flew to Greece a few weeks ago with my cousin. And we get up to cruising altitude, right? And the pilot comes out of the cockpit and says, "Are you John Kiriakou?"
That's
I said, "Yes." He says, "Yeah, I lay in bed at night. I watch your videos." I said, "Oh, thank you so much." We take a selfie. My cousin's like, "You got to be kidding me." I said, "How do I turn this into dollars? I just don't know." I got my first check from YouTube the other day. $365.
Come on.
Oh,
$1 a day,
man. Yeah.
Another day, another dollar. A million days, $1 million. You know what I mean?
That'll be worth 200 in another year if you just let it sit in the bank.
Exactly. Exactly.
I know it's silly, but it feels like you could sell swag, like with some sort of tagline that represents what you stand for. I feel like a lot of your followers would love to buy something to support you. Just a T-shirt or I don't know. I mean, you could fill up conference centers for sure. Like,
and you know what? And I have.
If you ever you're already going on a speaking tour, yeah,
which is cool. Which was canceled 2 days ago. We got 57.
No, you should do your own.
Listen to this. We got 57,000 clicks on the ticket link. We sold 7 tickets out of 57,000 because Meta redirected everybody to a blank white screen.
No way.
I think you should still do it, and I think you could run it yourself, and I think you'll have better margins. I think a speaking tour would be unbelievable for you. And I think that and maybe this other company knows how to do it, but they didn't know how to work a landing page. But I don't know. Maybe something else happened. Maybe Meta did something.
No,
I think there is something in that. I would pay to come listen to you talk if you came here to Raleigh-Durham. I would come listen to it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I think there's a way to do that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, man. Yeah, if you ever really want to chat about that, I mean, Matt and I are serial entrepreneurs. It's all we think about is how to turn our few skills into money.
Yeah, and Austin's pretty humble. He's been like a multi-time CTO and knows software better than anyone I've ever known. So we build our own little softwares here and there to help our production team. And, we're always coming across ideas like that too. So, Austin's got some serious software chops. And we know that there's things in there. There's just ideas that are coming, and the robots are helping. So Austin, I would say Austin was a 10x engineer, and now he's a 100x engineer. I mean, I've seen him build stuff that a team of 30 can't build, and so
Austin.
I think there's opportunity there. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Matt's really nice, but
okay, we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, for real. Like, man, we would be here just offline, just for free. That would be our honor, to be honest.
Geez, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I got to figure this out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. In my eyes,
we really appreciate it.
You're one of the guys making the future one of the things we will be able to live in. So,
like we said in the beginning, the world needs more John Kiriakou. So
for real,
we're gonna help however we can.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it means a lot to me.
Cool. Well, we know you got to get going. You got a hard stop. So thanks for taking the time with us. We really appreciate it.
Guys, really great to see you both.
You too. Bye-bye. You too. Be well.
You too. See ya.